Hi everyone, Stjepan here. Today I'm going to cover round 2 of the Lichtenrader Herbst tournament I played in Berlin. Yesterday I went over round 1 in which I had the black pieces against a 1500 player and it was sort of an easy game. In round 2 I faced a 21-20 young guy. He's 17, a really good player, a lot of experience despite being young. And he plays the Sicilian all the time against e4. And even though I've changed my opening repertoire and I play something else on move 1 now, I decided to play e4 because I found specific preparation against his e6 Sicilian. And the opening that he plays is after e4 c5, knight f3 e6. And he almost never deviates. There are only a few games where he doesn't play this, so I could be pretty sure that he was going to play e6 in our game if I play e4 knight f3 against the Sicilian. So I prepared the Kramnik variation, which I normally play against this, which is c4. And I prepared for about 5 or 6 hours, not really preparing for him, but just going over the lines in the Kramnik Sicilian and watching videos and doing anything I could to increase the knowledge in the variation. I was also going over some interesting games. So the opening is unsound for white in that it gives up white's opening advantage immediately. So this position is already equal. And despite that, it's perfectly playable for white, and it's not that easy for black to prove that equality over the board. So you shouldn't always listen to what the engines have to say, even though the opening is 0-0 on move 3. It could still be a good choice. Okay, so there is only one critical line after white goes for the Kramnik and follows up with an early d4. So knight c6. If I want to play it passively and have a closed center, then I could go for knight c3 and expect e5 and then d6 and d3 by white, and you have a sort of closed all Sicilian. But I don't play that. I play the positions with d4, and after c takes d4, knight takes d4, white now has a problem in the position. The e4 pawn is undefended, the knight is undefended if the bishop defends the e4 pawn, and if the knight defends the e4 pawn, then the bishop can pin the c3 knight from b4. And this series of moves is what happens in almost every game. So knight f6 attacking the pawn, knight c3 defending, bishop b4 now pinning the knight and undermining the pawn. Note that f3 is not a good move because takes and queen check could be devastating because this knight is pinned, and this should be just much better for black taking here or taking here. So in this position there is only one solution to the problem: knight takes c6, because if you play bishop d3 now, black will just take the knight. So knight takes c6, b takes c6. It's also possible to take with the d pawn, in which case white trades off the queens and has no problems. But b takes is a more interesting way to play, going for d5, not going for a queen exchange, and he is 200 points higher rated than me, so he should be going for complications. And now bishop d3. And in this position, of course, black has the option of taking on c3 and doubling white's pawns, but that really isn't good. These pawns aren't really that weak with my bishop pair. Let's say my bishop manages to get to d4 miraculously. And if d5 ever happens, I'm going to exchange my doubled pawn. And if d5 doesn't happen, then black's position is really cramped. So after this move bishop d3, it's clear that the only theoretical advantage black could get, which is doubling the pawns on the c file, isn't really an advantage. And the other thing is, in this position, it seems that white is threatening the move e5, and he sort of is, but it's more a bluff than a real threat. So let's say black castles and I play e5. It seems that the knight has to go back, otherwise it's lost, but there's this tricky move queen a5. And after queen a5, if white doesn't know the position, he could be in trouble. Taking the knight is a huge mistake, and of course, because then you lose the d3 bishop in the end. Let me just show you that takes, queen takes, and if you try bishop d3, I believe that queen takes d3 is just good for black. So after e5, queen a5, you have to find the move bishop f4, and bishop f4 is the only move which after bishop takes c3, b takes c3, queen takes c3, and king f1 gives a slight edge to white. So if this is the position you want to play, then fine, I really don't. So e5 is not a threat, but I found that most players are going to play e5 immediately with black, just to stop e5, because maybe in the future e5 could be a threat. Let's say black castles, white castles, then black plays something like, I don't know, bishop b7, then e5 really is a threat. Okay, so my opponent played e5. And here's basically the start of the position. I had a lot more prep, like 5 or 6 more moves in most lines, but this is where the game started. And I could see that he wasn't as familiar with the opening. Of course, the Kramnik Sicilian is very uncommon compared to all the other lines after e6. So I castled. And here there are several possibilities. Castles is the main move, bishop c5 is the second most common, d6 can be played, even bishop e7 can be played, just retreating the bishop back. Taking on c3 is not that common. He played bishop c5, and this I was very happy to see, because I thought this position gives an edge to white in all variations. I just couldn't see a way for black to equalize. So I play queen e2. And queen e2 prepares simply bishop e3 after I play h3. I'm sorry. Here he played d6, and now I cannot play bishop e3 because he's going to play knight g4 or bishop g4, which is even worse, so I play h3 first. Bishop e6, bishop e3, and now he played knight d7, which is a good move. So if I ever take the knight, he's going to take back with take the bishop, he's going to take back with his knight and have a very good knight. Something like b4 is a possibility, but then I can never really play b3 again and solidify my c4 pawn, so that's not something I want to do. So instead of that, I found this move knight a4, and knight a4 simply threatens to take the bishop. If he takes on e3, I'm going to take with the queen, and if he retreats the bishop, I'm just going to capture it. So he took, which is the best move, queen takes e3, queen a5, and now b3. And the reason why I want to play b3 and why I want this structure is that my c4 pawn is now defended. He doesn't have a b pawn to undermine my c4 pawn. It's still really hard to play d5 for him. If he plays d5, the center is going to open up for my pieces, and his king is still in the center. And I can always play something like knight c3 to stop d5 further. And I thought this position was really good for me. So castles, my only problem piece is the bishop, but I had some ideas of going f4, f5 later on. Although there was always this problem. If I go f4 and e takes f4, queen takes f4, he always has the e5 square for his knight, which is not something I wanted to allow. And even worse, because if f4, e takes f4, queen takes f4, knight e5, once he plays knight e5, I cannot play e5 myself and liberate my bishop. So I was kind of worried about this bishop, but everything else was perfect. Rook ad1, and now my plan was simply to put pressure on the d6 pawn, and it's not easy to defend. So I decided, okay, let's play around my bad piece. I can put enough pressure on his position without the bishop and play like that. So now he has a tempo gaining move, knight b6. Of course, I cannot allow him to take on a4. I cannot retreat my knight, that would be absurd, so I just take. He takes with the a pawn, repairing his structure, but now after bishop b1, where my a2 weakness is defended and his d6 weakness is really weak, it's clear that that white is better and that black is going to struggle here. Rook ad8, simply rook d2. And now he lashed out with f5, which I don't think is a good move. He traded off my bad bishop for his good bishop, and now that my d2 rook is defending a2, I really don't think that was a smart choice. So f5, I of course have to take ef5, bishop f5, bishop f5, rook f5, rook fd1, and this was the critical position in the game. So his pawn is about to fall, and he has to defend it somehow. The best way to defend it is to play d5, so to push it further on. If he plays rook f6, I believe that that's slightly too passive, and that I could even go something like queen e4 and try to put pressure on the c6 pawn, and I don't know, just play around his pieces, maybe continue with f4 in the future. So it wasn't easy to defend. And he played the move d5, which he'd been calculating for about 10 minutes, and the whole time I was calculating d5 as well. And after d5, there's one problem in the position, which, well, I saw farther down the line than he did, but I still didn't see far enough. So here there's one really good move for white, which if it works, then it works and you just win. And that's the move g4. The problem with g4 is that he can go d4. So I was calculating that for about 15 minutes and I played g4. And after I played g4, he thought for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then, okay, you're going to see what happened. So g4 attacks the rook. If the rook goes back, like to f6, queen takes e5. If the rook goes to g4, queen takes g4. So the only move to stay in the position for black is the move d4. And now what I was calculating is g takes f, d takes e3, rook takes d8, king f7, and f takes e. And after queen takes a2, I believe that my position, let's say I check here, no, let's say I check with the other rook, okay, because I need this check back. Okay, so here, this I think should be better for white, but this is as far as I could see when I was calculating, and I wasn't really sure that I haven't missed something, because with a queen and two rooks on the board, it's really easy to miss one nuance or one queen move that changes the position completely. But after d5, I did play g4 because I thought, well, okay, my philosophy is if you don't see that it doesn't work, do it, and I saw a way to just have two rooks for the queen in a superior position and the pawn up, and I thought it had to be good. So he thought for about 15 minutes, and he played rook f6, which I was really surprised to see. If you play rook f6, you just have a worse position, and if you play d4, it's not clear that I'm better. Well, I probably am better, but it's not clear. Okay, so after rook f6, I of course took on e5, and now he surprised me with rook d2 f8, attacking my f2 pawn, but now I just take. And here I thought he had better options, but he immediately recaptured, and now I have a chance to trade his d5 pawn for my f2 pawn, and I went for that. There's one line which my FIDE master friend pointed out after the game, which is really interesting, and that's rook c2. And rook c2 is such a strong move, and it's really simple. What rook c2 does, I'm defending my f2 pawn with the c2 rook, and I'm just going to take the d5 pawn later, and that's it. There's nothing he can do about it. I'm just going to take it. But I didn't see that. I missed that. After cd5, I took on d5, thinking that my position was winning. Queen d5, rook takes, rook f2, rook d2. He exchanged a pair of rooks, which is correct, because this position is easier to defend with only one pair of rooks. And now we enter this rook ending, which, okay, it's 2 against 1 on one side of the board, 2 against 2 on the other side of the board. So you can say that it's a draw on the king side, and white should be winning on the queen side. The only thing is, it will require patience and a lot of maneuvering for me to win this position. So he played rook c8, and I played what I think is a good human move, rook f2, just cutting off his king. There were probably more precise moves, but I think that this is fine. Rook c3, king g2, h6, h4. I have to push my pawns. g6, and now this. If he doesn't play g6, he doesn't have a move. He doesn't have a way to improve his position. And when he plays g6, he's basically asking for a trade of this pawn for this pawn. So g6, rook f6, rook c2 check, king g3, king g7. Now I had a decision to make. Do I want to get the passed pawn on the b file, or do I want a 2 against 1 still and keep my a2 pawn? I went for the latter option because I thought it was stronger. If I go rook b6, rook a2, b4, king f7, g5, I didn't like the fact that his king gets out, and something like this I think would be winning, but it would still require maneuvering, and I thought the other option was stronger, so I went for that. So rook f2, rook c3 check, rook f3, and now after he plays rook c1, or after he plays rook c2, I can play the move a4. But he played the move rook c1, And now I played a4, wanting to raise him with my pawns, and he played rook g1 check, which I sort of underestimated. Well, I didn't underestimate it. I just didn't factor it in well enough. So what I thought was I was going to do this. King h3, rook h1, here, sorry, king g2, takes. I was expecting this. And after here, let's say he tries to bring his rook back, I was going to do something like this. But I wasn't so sure. But after rook g1 check, I decided to play king f4 because I thought that this race was going to be stronger for white. So he played rook h1, of course, and now I messed up. This position is winning, and it's winning, and it's winning, and there's no doubt about it. What I have to do is play the move rook d3, and after he takes, I interpose this king g3 to make sure I don't allow h5. So king g3, rook h1, rook d7 check, and after the king runs out, then I just pick up the b6 pawn. If the king doesn't run out, if the king goes back, if the king goes back, then I can still pick up one of the pawns and have an easily winning position. Okay, so that was the solution, and both my opponent and I figured that out. And in fact, he told me after the game, "Why didn't you play rook d3?" I said, "I don't know," and I was slightly irritated because I didn't see a clear win, and then I started taking a long time and messed the position up. So after rook h1, I played an absurd move. I played rook g3, which instead of activating my rook and winning a couple of pawns, I just defend the g pawn passively. And my idea was to get my king over here and win his b6 pawn, which in theory works, but is a draw, and there's nothing there. So rook takes h4, king e3, king f6, b4, rook h1, king d4, king g5, and king c4. And in this position, we are just going to trade everything off, and the position is going to be a draw. We are going to either have a race 1-on-1 or 2-on-2. So a possible continuation would have been rook a1 and something like this, which is a complete draw. Or after king c4, he tries to put pressure on my pawn like this. I can go here, he takes, and now it's still just a very, very drawn ending. I can even do this, and yeah, it's just a draw. So after the move king c4, we agreed to a draw, which I was very upset with because I think I played a good game from start to finish, from start to the end game, and then this rook g3 was just a bad move. So I managed to mess up a rook ending a pawn up, and against a high-rated opponent. So it was unfortunate. A win would have been really good, but still, after 2 rounds, I had 1.5 out of 2, and I was happy. It was a stronger opponent, so it was fine. Tomorrow, I'm going to go over my round 3 game, which is probably the most interesting game I played in the tournament, even though all of them, except for round 1 and 6, were really, really instructive. Okay, I hope you like this game. Let me know what you think. If you want, and I would advise you to look at that if you want to. Just give me a second. Okay, rook takes d2. Okay, from this position, white to play. Try to play out this ending if you want. It's really instructive, trying to improve on my play. I think rook f2 is in inaccuracy, so you can start. You can start here. I thought it was really interesting ending, and obviously, if I had more time, or not more time, I actually had enough time. Well, if I was at home, I would be able to win that, I think, because I would have less stress, more concentration. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for more chess, and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.